Hi, my name is Cynthia Hamika. I'm a Bachelor of Fine Arts student at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, focusing on painting, drawing, and printmaking. When I first began oil painting, I struggled finding a palette that didn't feel so abnormal to what is commonly seen with traditional Impressionist style oil painting. I stuck to what I had learned and continued with dark backgrounds to contrast the subjects, which felt fitting considering that there was an outside directive to the work. As I was given more freedom conceptually, I was pushed to question what I want to create and why. I didn't necessarily know the answer to either of those questions, but I knew I wanted to taunt still life in a way by doing something passively chaotic, as well as breaking out of my norm by focusing on a concept that I was personally attracted to. I thought it would be interesting to gather an overly indulgent amount of sweets to assemble for a photo reference, both to better capture my own perspective of the subjects, as well as taking full part of the reference myself. In finding what I loved about painting dessert, I at first thought it was all about texture and lighting and the movement, so I focused on just that. After creating this work that individually observes pipe frosting, I still felt disconnected to the concept and meaning. I decided to reconnect with my work by focusing on objects that had more of a personal symbolism. I felt the best way for me to start a connection with my work was with nostalgia. I then created these two works as a diptych, both contrasting and complementing one another in concept and color. Although not literal instances from my childhood, these two images play on the idealization of a child and what children, or more specifically I as a child, would have loved to have seen. Both these objects are of current sweets, one of a popular gelato shop, and the other an actual s'more I had made as a reference. The faces work on the theme of animation, or bringing less stillness to a still life. Continuing on the idea of animating still life, but adding more life, I created this lithograph of bread shaped into bunnies. Instead of directly using the reference to give a feeling of liveliness, I added slight change in expression in each of the figures to give more character to the realistic subjects. This work also helped broaden my perspective of style translation through other mediums, as the result came out to have a similar texture and expression as my oil paintings. I worked with various mediums to see different ways I can keep my interest in fruits and desserts true to myself and using instinctual ideas. These two works are done with soft pastel on 18 by 24 inch papers. I then started to move away from realism and more into illustrative ideas. These two works are done with ink on 18 by 24 inch papers. Finding an interest in repetition and predictability at the beginning of an unpredictable period of time, I took notice in the art of tarts. When observed from a top perspective, it becomes an abstract image of a common pastry. The bold contrast and vivid color with the circular shape creates a transient state when being viewed, reminiscent of a clock or time. Similarly, in the creation process, I use broad unplanned strokes to get lost in movement and moment as a distraction from the future. The study of hand pies and the individuality of each, despite the similarity in the objects, finds connection with people. The spiraling blue strokes more literally represents a dream of planets colliding it began to have at the beginning of the pandemic. The idea to use pies works as a humorous correlation between pies, people, and planets. The focus on more accurately rendering details that make the objects more humanized continues in the interest of people and the peak of social separation. I was again inspired by past work, remembering a time before the pandemic when we could paint in the studio. I combined the concept of my own personal experience of creating similar character ice cream before the pandemic with current pandemic status, watching popular streaming series. I ended the summer of COVID and entered the BFA with this watermelon painting. Throughout the summer, my family and I often ended nights together eating watermelon with breads and cheeses, as my mom noted she would once do when she was growing up in the Middle East. I named the work Shamsia, which translates from Aramaic to watermelon. Getting to the BFA, I was able to step a bit away from home life and interact again with artists. As I moved away from the pandemic mood, I felt I finally had time again to emotionally deal with experiences I had prior that I wasn't necessarily able to get to. I continued on the visuals of a top view perspective to study bits of cereal. These specific cereals were once discontinued from my childhood that had recently been brought back into stores. Thinking about discontinuation as I look back on the people I lost throughout college, I create this work to visually deal with what I find difficult to literally express. I use nostalgia as a fallback of comfort. Continuing on a theme of illustration and reconnecting to personal interests, I started working with digital illustration. The literal characterization of sweets taunts my own ideas of works dealing with desserts as a mode for emotional expression. The series summarized my emotional reaction throughout 2020. Each work doubles as an animated GIF. The chaotic structure of the 20 scoop ice cream stands as a reflection of feeling disordered in a social and mental state. The quiet white background juxtaposing both the color and concept represents a solid exterior appearance despite a disheveled interior mindscape, then treating the mess with dotted and circular visuals to capture a sense of wholeness in the circular shapes. Barely is the complementary to the previous work, representing the desired result of clarity after chaos. I initially felt drawn to the clear acrylic because I found a visual satisfaction, presumably compensating for the lack of clarity and transparency I had felt at the time. Expanding on the possibilities of oil painting, I began creating soft sculptures that more literally depicted the objects that had current symbolism in my life. I create each piece by cutting canvas to their appropriate shape, sewing two pieces together, priming the canvas, and stuffing with cotton to then paint. This hanging soft sculpture depicts five croissant subjects. The croissant ripped in half both satirizes and realizes argumentative relationships, representing anger in the form of food, as well as breaking the illusion of painting and sculpture to parallel the distortion of conversation in a dispute. This painting depicts colored candy subjects over the exposed texture of the wood. Multiple layers of ink over a white base creates a thick, glossy finish reminiscent of real candy wrappers. The candies are playing on westernization and the use of having American sweets with traditional Turkish coffee as a part of contemporary Middle Eastern events. The reversible smile and frown reflect the changing conversation had over tea. Realizing that the basic purpose of a cake is to symbolize some sort of happiness, I decided in turn to use cake to reflect other emotions. I first baked and designed cake with frosting to express sadness and hurt I had felt at the time, both as a way to genuinely express myself and to satirize the use of cake. I used abstract style commonly seen in contemporary cake design to create my own expressive work and shapes. The break and the bite in the corner breaks the illusion of simple abstract work to a frosted cake. Through this last piece, I've realized that my entire goal, both artistically and socially, has been to appreciate the moment and breaking out of the loop of waiting for what could be. Always reminding myself to expect nothing and just to take each moment as it comes. Now looking back, I realized that I kept the idea of moment appreciation throughout my paintings. Each work has kept a memory alive of that specific moment that I lived through. I've grown to learn that instead of trying to make sense, I let people look at my work and make their own sense of it.